My beloved child, pause for a moment, because something subtle has already begun to unfold around you, and you almost missed it. There's a quiet thread running through your recent days, something you felt but couldn't fully explain. Not loud, not dramatic, just a presence, a pull, a knowing that appeared without asking for permission. And now you're here, wondering why it feels so real, why it lingers even when you try to ignore it. Look closer, not with your eyes, but with that inner awareness you rarely trust enough. That connection you feel, it didn't start where you think it did. It didn't begin with a message, a glance, or even a memory. It started before all of that, in a space where timing isn't measured the way you're used to. Strange, isn't it? How something so soft can feel so certain. You tried to dismiss it at first. You told yourself it's just a phase, just your thoughts wandering. But then, something shifted. Small details began aligning, moments repeating, that same energy showing up again, and again, as if gently tapping your shoulder, whispering, "Pay attention." And you did, even if only a little. Now ask yourself this: why does this connection feel different from everything else you've experienced? Why does it feel like it's not trying to impress you, not trying to prove anything, yet somehow, it reaches deeper than anything that ever did? Stay with that question, because the answer is not what you expect. It's not about them alone. It's not about you alone. It's about something that exists between both of you, something that formed quietly, without noise, without announcement. A connection that doesn't need constant validation to exist, because it was never built on surface things. Listen carefully, this is where most people misunderstand. They look for intensity. They chase excitement. They wait for something dramatic to confirm what they feel. But this is different. This connection doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It doesn't try to convince you. It simply stays. Even when you distract yourself. Even when you question it. Even when you try to move away. It stays, not as a force, but as a quiet truth waiting to be noticed. And here's something even deeper. You didn't just feel this connection randomly. There was a moment, maybe you didn't recognize it at the time, when something inside you opened. A small shift in your awareness. A silent readiness. And in that exact moment, this connection found its way to you. Not by accident, but by alignment. Let that sink in. Because if it came through alignment, then it's not here to confuse you. It's here to show you something. Something about yourself. Something about the way you connect. Something about what you're truly capable of feeling when you stop resisting what's real. You see, connections like this don't arrive to complete you. They arrive to reveal you. Pause here. Think about how you've been changing lately. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you notice things you used to overlook. It didn't happen all at once. It was gradual, subtle, almost invisible. But it's real. And somehow, this connection is tied to that change. Not forcing it, not controlling it, just reflecting it. And that's why it feels so different. Because for the first time, you're not just reacting, you're recognizing. Recognizing what feels genuine. Recognizing what doesn't need to be chased. Recognizing what naturally stays without effort. Don't skip this part, because something important is waiting for you here. There's a reason this connection didn't come with clear answers. There's a reason it feels like a puzzle that reveals itself slowly. It's because if you understood everything instantly, you wouldn't feel it the same way. You wouldn't grow into it. You wouldn't notice the depth. And most importantly, you wouldn't realize how much of this connection is actually about your own awareness expanding. Look again at what you feel. It's not just curiosity. It's not just attraction. It's something quieter, yet stronger. Something that doesn't demand attention, but earns it naturally. And here's the part that most people overlook. This connection is not trying to rush into something. It's trying to show you how to exist within something. There's a difference. One creates pressure. The other creates understanding. And right now, you're standing in that understanding, even if you don't fully realize it yet. Have you noticed how this connection doesn't feel forced? How it doesn't need constant communication to stay alive? How even silence between moments doesn't feel empty, but full of something unspoken? That's not coincidence. That's presence. A presence that doesn't disappear when things slow down. A presence that doesn't weaken when attention shifts. A presence that quietly remains, steady, calm, certain. And that's why it feels unfamiliar. Because you've been used to connections that needed constant reinforcement. This one doesn't. It exists on its own frequency. And somehow, you tuned into it. But here's where it becomes even more interesting. What if this connection is not just about where it's going, but about what it's awakening in you right now? Think about that. What if the real purpose of this feeling is not to pull you towards something outside, but to bring you closer to something within? Because if you look closely, you'll notice something. You're not just thinking about them. You're thinking about yourself differently. You're noticing your own emotions more clearly. You're becoming aware of patterns you never questioned before. And suddenly, things that once felt normal, no longer feel aligned. That's not random. That's the effect of a connection that doesn't distract you from yourself, but brings you back to yourself. Let that realization settle. Because it changes everything. This isn't about losing yourself in someone else. It's about finding yourself through something that feels real. And the more you understand that, the less confusing this connection becomes. But don't rush to define it. Don't try to label it too quickly. Because the moment you force it into something familiar, you might miss what makes it extraordinary. Just observe. Just feel. Just notice. Notice how it shows up in quiet moments. Notice how it lingers without effort. Notice how it doesn't need to prove itself, yet somehow, it does. And here's something you haven't fully seen yet. This connection is not only revealing what you feel. It's preparing you for something you haven't experienced before. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a sudden shift. But in a gradual unfolding. Where each realization leads to another, where each moment adds a new layer, where each feeling becomes clearer with time. And that's why it's happening slowly. Because what's real doesn't rush. What's meaningful doesn't overwhelm. It unfolds, step by step, in a way that allows you to actually understand it. And right now, you're only seeing the beginning of it. Stay a little longer. Because there's something you're about to notice. Something you've felt, but haven't fully acknowledged yet. There's a part of this connection that goes beyond what's visible, beyond what's spoken, beyond what you can logically explain. A part that feels like it already knows something, before it happens. A part that feels familiar, even when it's new. A part that feels certain, without needing proof. And you've felt that, even if you didn't trust it at first, even if you questioned it, even if you tried to explain it away, it's still there, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to recognize it. Because once you do, everything starts to make sense in a way you didn't expect. Not all at once, but gradually. And this is exactly where the next shift begins. Something about this is beginning to feel unmistakable, isn't it? Not louder, not more intense, but clearer. As if a fog you didn't even know was there is slowly lifting, revealing something that was always present, just slightly out of focus. And now, without forcing it, without chasing it, you're starting to see. But here's the part most people miss. Clarity doesn't arrive as a sudden answer. It arrives as a quiet recognition. And that's exactly what's happening to you. Because if you pause and look back at the way this connection has been unfolding, you'll notice a pattern. Not a predictable one, but a meaningful one. Moments that seemed small at first, now carry a different weight. Conversations that felt simple, now feel layered. Even silence feels like it holds something unspoken. Why? Why does something so subtle feel so significant? Stay with that question. Because the answer isn't outside of you. It's forming within you. You see, there's a difference between a connection that entertains your mind, and one that awakens your awareness. One fades when attention fades. The other deepens even in absence. And this one hasn't faded. Even when you distracted yourself. Even when you tried to move on to other thoughts. Even when you told yourself, it's probably nothing. It didn't disappear. It simply waited. Quietly. Patiently. As if it knew you would return to it. And now here you are again. Not because you had to, but because something in you chose to. That choice matters more than you think. Because it reveals something deeper. Something you're only beginning to understand. This connection is not pulling you. It's aligning with you. There's no force in it. No pressure. No urgency demanding you to act or decide. Instead, there's a gentle presence that allows you to arrive at your own pace. And that's why it feels safe. Not in a loud or obvious way, but in a quiet, steady way. The kind of safety that doesn't need reassurance, because it doesn't create doubt in the first place. Have you noticed that? How this connection doesn't leave you questioning your worth, doesn't make you feel like you have to prove something, doesn't push you into overthinking every small detail. Instead, it does something unexpected. It brings you into a state of calm awareness. A place where you can simply be. And that's rare. Because most connections create noise. This one creates space. Space for you to think clearly. Space for you to feel honestly. Space for you to recognize what's real, without confusion. But here's where it becomes even more powerful. That space is not empty. It's filled with something you're just starting to notice. Presence. A presence that doesn't demand your attention, but gently holds it. A presence that doesn't interrupt your life, but quietly integrates into it. A presence that feels consistent. And consistency is what transforms something from a passing feeling into something meaningful. Don't skip this moment, because something important is waiting for you here. Think about how rare it is to feel something that doesn't fluctuate wildly. Something that doesn't depend on constant interaction to stay alive. Something that doesn't feel uncertain one moment and overwhelming the next. This stays steady. And that steadiness is not accidental. It's intentional, in a way that doesn't need to be spoken. But there's something even deeper beneath that. Something you're only beginning to realize. This connection is not just showing you what it is. It's showing you what you're ready for. Pause with that. Because it shifts everything. You're not experiencing this by chance. You're experiencing it because you've reached a point where you can actually recognize it. Before, you might have overlooked it. Before, you might have mistaken it for something ordinary. But now, you see the difference. Now, you feel the difference. And once you feel that difference, you can't unfeel it. That's why it keeps returning to your awareness. Not to distract you. Not to confuse you. But to remind you. Remind you of the way something real feels. Remind you of the kind of connection that doesn't need to be forced. Remind you that what's meant to stay doesn't need to chase. And slowly, without even realizing it, you're beginning to trust that. Not completely. Not all at once. But enough to keep paying attention. And that's all it needs right now. Just your attention. Just your awareness. Just your willingness to not turn away from what you feel. Because the moment you fully acknowledge it, something shifts. Not outside, inside. A clarity that wasn't there before begins to form. A sense of understanding that doesn't rely on explanations begins to grow. And suddenly, things that once felt confusing start to feel simple. Not easy, but clear. There's a difference. Clarity doesn't remove complexity, it removes doubt. And that's what's happening to you. The doubt is slowly dissolving. Not because someone told you what this is. Not because you forced an answer. But because you allowed yourself to feel without resistance. And that's where the truth always reveals itself. But wait. There's something else here. Something even more subtle. You might have noticed it, but not fully understood it yet. This connection doesn't just appear in obvious moments. It shows up unexpectedly. In random thoughts. In quiet pauses. In those moments when you're not even trying to think about it, yet it gently finds its way back. Why does that happen? Why does it return without effort? Because it's not something you're creating consciously. It's something you're becoming aware of. And awareness, once awakened, doesn't go back to sleep. It expands. It deepens. It begins to reveal layers you didn't see before. And this is just one of those layers. But not the only one. Because as you continue to observe, as you continue to feel without forcing, you'll begin to notice something even more profound. This connection is not only consistent. It's evolving. Not in a way that feels unstable, but in a way that feels like it's unfolding. As if each moment adds something new. Something you didn't expect. Something that makes you pause and think. Why does this feel so, right? And that question is not random, it's leading you somewhere. Somewhere you haven't fully reached yet, but you're moving toward it without even trying. That's the beauty of something that aligns. It doesn't need to push you forward. You naturally move toward it. But here's the part you haven't fully seen yet. This movement, this quiet unfolding, is preparing you for a realization that goes beyond what you feel right now. A realization that will change the way you understand this connection completely. Not by adding more complexity, but by revealing something simple, yet powerful. And that moment is closer than you think. Stay with it, just a little longer. There's a moment approaching, so quiet, you might almost overlook it, and yet, everything within you has been moving toward it. Not all at once, not in a rush, but gently, like a realization that has been forming in the background, waiting for the exact second you're ready to see it without resistance. And now, that second is near, because something inside you has changed. You're no longer asking, "What is this?" in the same way. Now, you're beginning to ask, "Why does this feel so natural?" That shift is everything. It means you're no longer standing outside the connection trying to understand it. You're inside it now, experiencing it. And when that happens, the need for constant answers begins to fade. Because the feeling itself becomes the answer. Pause here. Let yourself notice how different that is from anything you felt before. This isn't about chasing clarity anymore. It's about recognizing what has already become clear. You don't feel lost in it. You don't feel overwhelmed by it. Instead, you feel steady, grounded, aware, as if something within you has quietly aligned with something beyond you. And now, the two are no longer separate. And here's where the deeper truth begins to reveal itself. This connection you feel. It's not here to lead you somewhere distant. It's here to meet you exactly where you are. That's why it doesn't feel like a struggle. That's why it doesn't create pressure. That's why it doesn't demand you to become someone else. Because it recognizes you, as you already are. And in that recognition, something powerful happens. You begin to see yourself more clearly. not through someone else's expectations, not through old patterns, but through a quiet understanding that feels honest, real, unfiltered. And that's rare, because most people search for connections that validate them. But this one reveals you. And when something reveals you, it doesn't just stay at the surface. It goes deeper, layer by layer, gently, without force, until you begin to notice things you once ignored. The way you respond, the way you feel, the way you understand yourself in moments where you used to feel uncertain. And suddenly, you're not the same version of yourself who first noticed this connection. You've shifted, not dramatically, not visibly to everyone else, but internally, something is different. And that difference is the real meaning behind all of this. Don't skip this part, because something important is waiting for you here. This connection is not just about two people sensing something between them. It's about what becomes possible within you because of it. The awareness, the clarity, the calm certainty that doesn't need constant reassurance. These are not small things. They are signs of something deeper unfolding. Something that doesn't rely on timing alone, but on readiness. And you are becoming ready. Ready to understand connections beyond surface feelings. Ready to recognize what doesn't need to be forced. Ready to trust what feels steady instead of what feels intense. And that's why this feels so different. Because it's meeting you at a version of yourself that didn't exist before. Think about that. If this had come to you earlier, would you have understood it the same way? Would you have recognized its quiet strength? Or would you have overlooked it, chasing something louder instead? You already know the answer, and that's why it's here now, not before, not later, now, because now, you can see it for what it is, not as something to hold on to tightly, but as something to experience fully, without fear, without urgency, without confusion. And that's where the final shift begins. Because once you stop trying to define it, once you stop trying to control where it leads, once you simply allow it to exist as it is, you begin to notice something unexpected. It deepens, not by effort, not by action, but by presence. Your presence, their presence, the shared space between both, becoming clearer, stronger, more real with each passing moment. And suddenly, the question is no longer, where is this going? The question becomes, what is this showing me right now? And the answer, it's been there all along. This connection is showing you that something real doesn't need to rush. It doesn't need to prove itself loudly. It doesn't need to compete with anything. It simply exists. And in its existence, it reveals truth. Truth about how you feel. Truth about what you're ready for. Truth about what you no longer need to chase, because it naturally stays. And once you see that, everything changes. Not outside, inside. A quiet certainty replaces confusion. A calm understanding replaces overthinking. A steady awareness replaces doubt. And from that place, you begin to move differently. Not with urgency, not with fear of losing something, but with trust. Trust in what you feel. Trust in what you recognize. Trust in what doesn't need to be forced to be real. And that trust, that's the true connection. Not just between you and someone else, but between you and yourself. Because in the end, this wasn't only about discovering something between two people. It was about discovering something within you that was always there, waiting to be seen. And now that you've seen it, even if only a little, you can't go back to not knowing. You can only move forward. With a deeper understanding, a clearer awareness, and a quiet sense that something meaningful has already begun. even if the full picture is still unfolding. And just when you think you've understood it, something even quieter begins to reveal itself, not as a new feeling, but as a deeper layer of the same one, like a hidden meaning inside a sentence you've read many times, but only now truly grasp. And in that moment, you don't feel surprised, you feel certain, because something within you already knew. This is where everything becomes still, not empty stillness, but a full, grounded calm where nothing needs to be proven anymore. No chasing, no second guessing, no silent questions repeating in your mind. Just a quiet knowing that settles gently, without asking for attention. Have you noticed how different this feels from the beginning? Back then, it was curiosity. Then it became awareness. Now, it's recognition. Recognition that this connection was never here to confuse you, only to guide you inward, step by step, until you reached this exact point. And here, something shifts again, not outwardly, but in the way you hold it. You're no longer holding this connection like something fragile, something that could disappear if you think too much or move the wrong way. Now, you're allowing it to exist without pressure. Allowing it to unfold without control, allowing it to be what it is, without trying to turn it into something else too quickly. And that is where its true depth begins, because when something is no longer forced, it reveals its natural form. And what you're starting to see now is not just the connection itself, but the space it creates around you, a space where you feel more like yourself. More present, more aware of what feels right, and what doesn't. It's subtle, but powerful, because it's not asking you to change. It's showing you what naturally aligns with who you already are becoming. Stay with this, because something important is waiting for you here. There's a reason this connection didn't come with urgency. There's a reason it didn't push you into quick decisions or overwhelming emotions. It's because what's real respects your pace. It meets you where you are, and grows with you, not ahead of you. And now, you're beginning to match its pace. No longer rushing to understand. No longer trying to predict where it leads. Just walking with it, feeling it, observing it. And in doing that, you've unknowingly reached a place where something rare happens. You've stopped trying to hold on to it, and started becoming someone who doesn't need to. That's the shift. And it changes everything. Because when you no longer hold on to something out of fear, you begin to experience it out of truth. And truth doesn't create anxiety. It creates peace. Have you felt that peace? Even in small moments. Even in quiet thoughts. That sense that everything is okay, not perfect, not fully understood, but okay. And that feeling is not separate from this connection. It's part of it, a reflection of what it brings into your awareness. Because this connection is not only about feeling close to someone. It's about feeling closer to clarity, closer to presence, closer to a version of yourself that doesn't need to chase meaning, because meaning naturally appears. And now, something even more subtle is beginning to unfold. You might not have words for it yet, but you've felt it. A gentle sense that this connection is not limited to what you can see right now. That it carries something more, something that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. Not in a dramatic way, not in something sudden, but in a quiet unfolding that continues, even when you're not paying attention. Almost like it's alive in its own way, growing, deepening, expanding, without asking for effort, without demanding anything from you. And that's why it feels so different, because it doesn't need to be controlled to exist. It simply is. And here's where the final understanding begins to settle in. This connection is not something you found. It's something you recognized. Something that was always possible, always present in a deeper sense, but only became visible when you were ready to see it. And now that you've seen it, you're no longer the same person who once questioned it. You've moved beyond that, not into certainty about the future, but into trust in the present. And that's more powerful than any answer, because the present is where everything real exists, not in what might happen, not in what could be, but in what is, right now, in this moment, in this feeling, in this quiet awareness that doesn't need to explain itself to be understood. And as you sit with that, you begin to notice something else, something that feels almost like a quiet smile within you, a sense that, whatever this connection becomes, it has already given you something meaningful, something real, something that has changed the way you see, feel, and understand. And that can't be taken away, because it was never dependent on anything external. It came from within you, awakened through something that simply helped you notice it. Pause here. Let that sink in fully, because this is where the journey quietly transforms into something new. Not an ending, not a conclusion, but a continuation, in a different form, where you're no longer searching. You're simply aware. Aware of what feels aligned. Aware of what feels real. Aware of what doesn't need to be forced to stay. And in that awareness, you begin to move through life differently, more grounded, more present, more connected, not just to someone else, but to yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that was always the deeper meaning behind this connection, not just to bring two paths closer, but to bring you closer to your own. And as this understanding settles gently within you, you realize something quiet, yet powerful. This connection was never ahead of you. It was always walking beside you, waiting for the moment you finally slowed down enough to notice.